This morning, Qantas cutbacks, the airline reeling from the coronavirus crisis. Tens of thousands of staff stood down and all international flights grounded. Pandemic emergency, the Reserve Bank tipped to cut interest rates as global markets suffer another massive sell-off. And supermarket police, officers to patrol the aisles in a bid to maintain order.
This is 7 News with Ann Sanders.
Good morning. Qantas and Jetstar will suspend international flights by the end of the month and stand down two-thirds of its almost 30,000 employees. Live now to political reporter Jennifer Beshwati in Canberra. Good morning, Jen. This is an extraordinary announcement.
Yeah, it is, Anne, but unfortunately it's not surprising. After the Prime Minister yesterday announced an effective ban on all travel, the airlines have been preparing for the consequences. And today, the first to fall, Qantas announcing it's suspending all international flights by the end of the month, temporarily grounding at least 160 aircraft. It's cutting domestic flights by 60%, but the big loss, the company is standing down two-thirds of its workforce. It's got almost 30,000 employees. That's almost 20,000 jobs gone. CEO Alan Joyce says that with the major drop in revenue, the company has to make difficult decisions to guarantee the future of the national carrier.
While people can use their annual leave during this time, so they will still be paid, and we're introducing several measures to help them. But for many, a period of unpaid leave is inevitable. Qantas is turning 100 this year. We've gone through wars, the Great Depression, the GFC, and countless natural disasters, and we will get through this.
Now, the federal government did announce a relief package for the airlines this week, $715 million worth, and that was waiving a range of government charges, including the fuel excise. The Transport Minister, Michael McCormack, says he'll work with the industry to make sure they receive the support they need. But the government's first priority now is the health and safety of Australians. There was a suggestion by the government this week to also look into job swapping, and so those that have been laid off by the airlines perhaps finding work now in places where the demand is high, such as the supermarkets.
Jen, the government is putting the final touches on its second stimulus package. Do we know what will be in it?
Well, we know that it will be focused on cushioning the impact of the virus. So those that will lose their jobs as a result, like those at Qantas, this will help them get back on their feet. We understand perhaps that there might be a new welfare category that's being considered, a higher rate than the dole, a higher rate than Newstart. That's currently $490 a fortnight. It will be available to casuals and full-time workers who lose their jobs as a result of the virus. It's a temporary wage to help them get through the year, but I stress it's not confirmed. This is just an option that the federal government may be considering. We'll know the details by Sunday at the earliest. But Anne, the government is preparing for hundreds of millions of jobs lost as a result of the coronavirus, possibly over 1 million, and thousands of businesses closing. Yes, the Qantas announcement is a shock, but it won't be the last.
Jen Beshwati in Canberra. Thank you, Jen. Trading on Wall Street had to be halted yet again in another terrible day for investors. Our Network Finance Editor Gemma Acton joins us now. Good morning, Gemma. How have we opened this morning?
Oh, well, and shares leapt about 3% higher this morning, but have now backtracked and lost almost all of these early gains. We're now zigzagging around zero between positive and negative territory. Still, of course, it could be worse. Overnight in the US, it wasn't just the share market that plummeted. Investors also aggressively sold down bonds, gold, oil, anything they could get their hands on in a rush for the safety of cash. And in a sign of the times, the New York Stock Exchange will temporarily close its famous trading floor and only operate electronically as of Monday. This comes as 2 people at the exchange tested positive for the virus this week.
And Gemma, a rate cut could be on the cards from the Reserve Bank's emergency meeting this afternoon.
Yes, Anne, it's widely expected we'll get another 0.25% cut at 2:30 p.m. today, alongside some more unconventional policy measures, such as the kick-off of a quantitative easing program. Now, the goal of a QE program, as it's known, would be to lower bank borrowing costs so they can pass cheap loans onto struggling businesses. Meantime, the Aussie dollar continues to spiral downwards. It's now trading around 57.7 US cents. Anne.
Gemma Acton reporting. Thank you, Gemma. Victoria has seen a spike in coronavirus cases this morning as another school is shut down. Let's go live to Laurel Irving in Melbourne. Good morning, Laurel. What's the latest from authorities there?
Good morning, Anne. Well, the Premier has announced that Victoria has another 28 cases more than yesterday. We now have 149 confirmed cases here in Victoria. And we know that nationally too, that figure is now approaching 600. As you said, we have another school closed. Middle Park Primary in Bayside, Melbourne has closed after a staff member there tested positive. And we've just heard in the last little while, the University of Melbourne has also had a staff member test positive. That means their building will now be closed for a couple of days while it's cleaned. The Premier this morning has announced a huge, nearly $500 million package for the healthcare system to cope. Now, this will go to reopening closed hospitals to get more beds online, hiring more staff, more casuals and backfills for healthcare workers who might be affected by the virus, and also buying equipment. And that includes ventilators, dialysis machines, but also masks, gloves and gowns for healthcare workers.
This is a massive boost to our public hospital system. It's exactly what's needed: more staff, more beds, more equipment, so we can do more for those who are sick. This is everything that is required right now.
And a huge elective surgery blitz begins today. The idea, Anne, is to get as much elective surgery done over the next 3 to 4 weeks before that COVID-19 peak hits, when they expect elective surgery will probably have to be cancelled.
Laurel Irving joining us live from Melbourne. Thank you, Laurel. Tasmania will impose tougher border restrictions, requiring all non-essential travellers to self-isolate for 14 days. Essential travel will be exempt from the quarantine. A state of emergency has now been declared. The restrictions will come into force from midnight on Friday. As supermarket shelves continue to be stripped bare and the Prime Minister implores people to stop hoarding, police officers could become a common sight at supermarkets in New South Wales. Let's go to Amber Laidler in Sydney. Amber, there's a move on to maintain order.
Good morning. Yes, police will now be patrolling supermarkets and shopping centres in New South Wales in a bid to keep shoppers and staff safe after calls from the Prime Minister to stop the pandemic panic buying and violent behaviour. Police officers are now being rostered to various supermarkets to keep an eye on shoppers and will be increasing their presence at multiple shopping centres. The State's Deputy Commissioner saying it isn't only a safeguard measure but also to ensure members of the public don't feel uneasy going about their daily lives. It's an unprecedented move as supermarkets try to deal with unprecedented demand. This morning, a long line of seniors was outside this Woolworths ahead of community hour getting their pension cards checked before they were allowed to enter. Many saying this initiative has provided them with a lot of relief.
The management as well has brought through to the top. Thank you very, very much for helping us. We're very grateful.
There appeared to be plenty to go around this morning at this supermarket, with happy shoppers successfully securing their supplies, including toilet paper.
There's been a huge increase in coronavirus deaths in Europe and the UK, despite more drastic measures aimed at slowing the spread. Alex Hart is in London, where the British government has announced the closure of all schools. Alex, when will this take effect?
Good morning. Friday afternoon is when this decision will take effect. All schools across the UK closing indefinitely. It is a major change in position for the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who until today had insisted that there was no need to close schools.
After schools shut their gates from Friday afternoon, they will remain closed for most pupils, for the vast majority of pupils, until further notice.
Despite more countries in Europe going into lockdown, the death toll from coronavirus continues to rise. Almost 500 more deaths in Italy, the biggest single day jump anywhere. German Chancellor Angela Merkel described the crisis as the biggest challenge her country has faced since World War II.
Countries must isolate, test, treat and trace. If they don't, transmission chains can continue at a low level, then resurge.
Many more major events in Europe and in the UK have been cancelled, among them the Eurovision Song Contest. So too, the royal wedding of Princess Beatrice and her fiancé Edoardo Mozzi. The Queen was due to host a reception for the couple here in the gardens of Buckingham Palace in May, but now they're considering just having a simple private ceremony to avoid any unnecessary risks.
Thank you, Alex. The Australian Olympic Committee has refused to pull out of the Olympics as we edge closer to the Tokyo Olympics. 7 News Sports editor Jim Wilson is in Sydney, where officials spoke this morning. Good morning, Jim. What did they say?
Morning, Anne. Well, quite extraordinary, this media conference this morning, Anne, in light of the worldwide hookup between the International Olympic Committee last night and also our Olympic officials. They're saying it's business as usual. Quite surprising. Some people, you can't blame them for the perception that that basically Olympic officials are in denial. They're not even saying the Games are in doubt, Anne, as far as starting on July 24, and the same goes for the Paralympics on August 25. What I can say out of this morning's media conference, which concluded a short time ago at AOC headquarters, the Games will not be postponed. They're adamant that if they don't go ahead on July 24 in Tokyo, they'll be cancelled completely. Let's have a listen to what AOC Chief Executive Matt Carroll had to say, and also Chef de Mission Ian Chesterman.
If you think back where this virus was a month ago, things have changed. It is that 4 months. The Prime Minister himself said the other day, no one's quite too sure how things will pan out over the next 4 to 6 months.
If it's all about our athletes' welfare, how on earth is this viable?
We have to take faith in the IOC process they've set up with the World Health Organisation to be ensuring that the environment which we're moving into is safe. And the two
So they kept on coming back to that word, athletes' welfare. Right now, athletes' preparations are severely disrupted. Only 60% of our team have qualified for the Olympics in Tokyo. And you've got to remember, Anne, that athletes in particular in one of the hotspots of coronavirus in Europe, well, their preparations are also severely hindered. We should also make the point that drug testing procedures have been compromised as well through this coronavirus in various parts of the world. Right now, they're saying business as usual, and let's cut to the chase. The Olympics and Paralympics are right on a knife's edge. Back to you.
Jim, thank you very much for updating us. We'll see you for sport shortly. Don't go away. Coming up in 7 News, a daring escape. Dozens of Australians flee a cruise ship as the coronavirus pandemic cuts their holiday short. Smash and grab a brazen Sydney jewellery store heist caught on camera. The hunt for 3 bandits. Australians on board an international cruise ship have decided to leave by lifeboat. The MV Columbus has hundreds of Aussies on board after stopping in Sydney, Cairns and Darwin. The ship had been ordered to return to its original port in England amid the coronavirus pandemic. Australian passengers had 2 choices: spend the next 4 weeks at sea or join a nearby cruise ship headed for Western Australia. America and Canada have agreed to shut down the border as they try to halt the spread of the virus. The move's been made after 1,000 new cases were confirmed. Paul Caddick filed this report from New York.
Good morning, Anne. With more than 1,000 new cases over the past 24 hours here in the United States, more and more this country feels like it's heading for a war footing. Today, the US-Canada border was closed temporarily for all non-essential traffic. Donald Trump invoked wartime powers that would require factories to produce what the nation needs. And in that case, it is more masks and more equipment like respirators, which are badly needed. Today, US Navy hospital ships we're starting preparations to be deployed. They carry 1,000 beds each. One will go to the West Coast, one will come here to New York City, where they will be able to take non-virus cases from local hospitals so the hospitals can deal with the expected surge in cases of COVID-19. Donald Trump was saying today he feels like a wartime president, but he was on the defensive, facing criticism for starting to refer to COVID-19 as the Chinese virus on social media.
It's not racist at all, no, not at all. It comes from China. That's why. It comes from China. I want to be accurate.
The White House continuing discussions on Capitol Hill of its proposed economic stimulus plan, spending more than $1 trillion to try and back up industries that have already been hard hit, like the airline industry, and looking at spending some $500 billion in cash handouts, as Americans are told to act as though they all have the virus and behave accordingly. From New York, it's back to you.
Thank you, Paul. Three men are on the run after raiding a Sydney jewellery store. Andrew Denny is at the business in the city. Andrew, how bad is the damage there?
Well, it was just after 3 o'clock this morning that these brazen thieves broke into the Jewellery jewellery store here in the middle of Sydney's CBD, smashing absolutely every cabinet inside and taking countless dollars worth of stock. These security pictures show the moment these three men pull up outside the George Street store using a sledgehammer to break through the front door before smashing every display cabinet in. The thieves came prepared, wearing gloves, hoodies and with their faces covered. They also brought a large skip bag to dump approximately $500,000 worth of jewellery inside. Precious rings, necklaces, brooches and earrings were all taken in under 3 minutes. The store's owners have been in the business for more than 3 decades and have never faced something like this before.
It hasn't hit us yet. We are at the moment still the most important thing that's happened at night, not during the day.
Now, the getaway car that was used was stolen from Bronte back in January this year, a Mercedes all-wheel drive, registration CLB 86H. It was last seen on George Street heading towards the Anzac Bridge. Now, police are asking for everyone to take a very close look at this security video, and if they have any suspicions about who might be involved, to contact Crime Stoppers.
Thanks, Andrew. Next in 7 News, sport with Jim Wilson, including an NRL great joins the support for continuing the season. Also, we have the latest news on the AFL giving the green light for round 1.
Good morning, everyone. The AFL season begins tonight in front of an empty MCG when Richmond takes on Carlton in the traditional season opener. Let's go now live to Mark Stevens at the MCG. Good morning, Steve-O. The AFL Commission, they left it until the very last minute last night to make a decision, but it will go ahead tonight between the Tigers and the Blue Baggers.
Yeah, certainly a strange feeling here today, Jimmy. Very quiet, but footy is back, and the Commission definitely did take it down to the wire. We found out at 7:45 last night, which was actually 90 minutes after the teams came out, and we were still in the dark. Finally, Gil McLachlan announced that footy would go ahead under the advice of the best politicians around and medical experts. So the Commission, in the end, voted to give footy a chance. I suppose one positive test, and we will have major issues. The game could be suspended, but for now we're going to have a crack. The issue is it could be a 6-month process, and I asked Gil McLachlan, the boss, if we could in fact play an entire season without a single spectator in the stands.
That's right, Steve. And it's part. I think it's going to be a long year, and our players and our industry want to get moving. And while the advice is so clear that it's appropriate for them to play, they want to get started, and they know that this is going to be a long journey.
So amazing times. And just some news at North Melbourne. Majak Daw was set to return. He's now gone home with the sniffles and the cold, so has been quarantined, if you like, so set to miss this week, Jim.
Good on you, Steve. I know you're across all this afternoon as we count down to the opening bounce tonight. More in 7 News Melbourne and around the country at 4 and 6 o'clock. Thanks to Mark Stevens there. Well, South Sydney coach Wayne Bennett believes it's important the NRL continues despite restrictions due to the coronavirus threat. The Rabbitohs and Broncos will play in front of an empty stadium in Brisbane tomorrow, but Bennett isn't
We love
concerned.
crowds there and we love the atmosphere, but I think once the game gets in under playing conditions, the instinct will just take over and they'll be doing their best.
Souths and the Broncos are looking for back-to-back wins tomorrow night at Suncorp Stadium. The season, or round 2, begins tonight when the Bulldogs host the Cowboys. The FFA will condense the rest of the A-League season to play as many games as possible, as soon as possible. The governing body has released the fixture for this weekend's games and will provide rolling updates for the coming rounds as the coronavirus pandemic changes.
Yeah, it's a difficult time for everyone at the moment. It's good to keep the A-League going, keeps people watching the A-League as well, keeps it in sight for the supporters.
Melbourne Victory and the Wellington Phoenix are currently in quarantine for 14 days after returning from New Zealand. Their games will be played at a later date. So we are on location because the AOC, the Olympic Committee, has held a media conference at their headquarters just a stone's throw from here. What we can say, just recapping our earlier news, that Tokyo right now is proceeding on July 24 and that the AOC will be guided by the International Olympic Committee. We'll have more on this developing story, Anne, at 4 and 6.
Speak with you then. Thank you very much, Jim Wilson. Next in 7's Morning News, the national weather forecast with David Brown. Let's get a check of the weather forecast now with 7 News meteorologist David Brown. Good morning, Brownie.
Yes, good morning, Anne. A cool change is now making its way across the southern states, though. In fact, let's go to the radar and check it out. There it is. It's producing areas of rain. In fact, Tasmania will benefit mostly from this system as far as rainfall goes. The cooler air, though, it's a long way back. In fact, it should affect the southern states late tomorrow, and of course that affects Victoria and Tasmania. Let's go to the weather wall now. Different stories. We fly north into Brisbane. It's warm and mostly sunny, and a forecast top near 28 degrees today. More sunshine is expected in the harbour city as well. As we take a look at current conditions, today's top 29 degrees. As you saw from the radars, we move into Melbourne. Clouds building up. Yes, there is a change on the way. A few showers are likely later this afternoon. Might see a thunderstorm as well, around 30 degrees. But in Adelaide, the sky is clear and heading for 32 degrees. We can see warm air from the interior streaming all the way towards the coastal fringe at the moment, ahead of that cold front. Of course, just the change we're keeping an eye on. Tomorrow, yes, areas of rain gradually moving through. Some storms are in the mix as well. But for Sydney tomorrow, hot. 35 degrees. Can you believe it? The other side of the change, Melbourne should be, well, clear and 22. That's the latest weather. More coming your way at 4 o'clock, Anne.
All right, Brownie, thank you very much. And that's 7 News to now. At 12:30 this afternoon, we'll bring you a live update on the coronavirus pandemic from the Australian Government Deputy Chief Medical Officer in Canberra. It'll be broadcast across the network right here on 7. Sydney and Prime viewers across New South Wales, stand by for a press conference from the Premier. I'll see you then.